want to welcome you to our Bible study, to our Sunday school lesson. And if you remember, last week we were in the book of Habakkuk, and we were talking about the consequences for our injustices. Now this week, we're in the book of Micah, and we want to look at the third chapter, the first through the third verse, then the 9th through the 12th verse, and then we're going to jump to the 6th chapter, the 6th through the 8th verse. Today is March the 22nd, 2020. When you first think of our subject and argument against corruption, you have to ask yourself, what kind of person am I? Am I one that likes to argue, or am I just a corruptible person? Well, this is what Micah was challenging, and as many of you know, some of you may not know, Micah is a prophet, and Micah is one of the minor prophets. However, Micah carried a major prophet's theme. So there was nothing really minor about Micah other than the message, the length of the message that he brought. When you put yourself in Micah's shoes, Micah argued for the Lord against corruption. And this ought to be all of our theme for today. All of us should stand up for what's right and what corruption really means, because it affects each and every one of us. As we go into this lesson and we look at this first verse of chapter 3, Micah says this, and I said, hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and ye prince of the house of Israel, ye prince of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know judgment? Now, when you think about this and you think about what Micah is saying and who Micah is talking to, Micah is really talking to the prophets. He's denouncing the rulers, the people that are in charge of all of God's people. And let me put a pin right there, because I really need to tell you this. If you are going to be in charge of God's people, if you are going to be one of God's chosen, once you have said, I am a Christian, meaning Christ-like, then you are obligated to do the right thing. Even though your position may put you in a place where you can treat people differently, you should always stand up to do the right thing. And that's exactly what Micah was saying. If we look at this particular verse, he said, and I said, this addresses is introducing himself really to three main groups. He's talking to the heads of Jacob, because these are the ones that are in charge. And I got to tell you, it's good to be large, but it may not always be good when you're in charge, because God will hold you responsible. Micah addresses the heads of these families, the magistrates, the judges. Micah sends this message directly to the people that it affects. Now, a lot of people want to jump at position. A lot of people want to be in charge, but seldomly do people really want to be a servant. They want to be served, but not a servant. I gotta tell you, you gotta watch it. There is a doom in line if you mislead or treat God's people wrong. Look at this now. It said, it is not for you to know judgment. Ye are all men ought to know that what is just and fair, and to practice it. This is all under this initial first verse. Micah is really laying the law down to the prince, to the judges, and to the people that are in charge. He's telling them, look, you guys, y'all living here, y'all are having God's privilege over his people. You better watch yourself, because God is not going to let you off easy. I know that should scare you, because it definitely scares me. Verse 2 of this 3rd chapter, he goes on to say, who hate the good and love the evil? Who plucks off their skin from off of them, and their flesh from off their bones? Now, if you think about this, you got to ask yourself, it's easy to treat yourself good. It's easy to pamper yourself. But what we are really supposed to be doing is taking care of the kingdom of God. So even that guy that you walk past, that you really don't want to talk to, that you don't want to shake hands with, that's the one that Jesus said he came back to get. So you got to watch how you treat other folks. I brought you some scriptures, Amos 5, 14, John 3 and 20, and Romans 1 and 32. All of those scriptures is telling you what I'm telling you right now. You better be careful when you're in charge of God's people. This prophet Ezekiel also piggybacked on what Micah is saying. Ezekiel 34, 2 and 4 gives you the exact same thing that Micah is telling you. I sure hope you take a moment and write these scriptures down, because this is paramount important to us, because judgment starts in the house of God. The 3rd verse of the 3rd chapter of Micah. He says, who also eat the flesh of my people and flay their skins off them, and they break their bones and chop them into pieces, as for the pots and as flesh within the cauldron. Now Micah, you understand this, understood something about the chores and the occupations of the children of God, so he could relate to them in such terms that they actually understood. Of course, he's speaking metaphorically, because he knows that they are not cutting literally up God's people. But if you remember in the previous chapter, in chapter 2, Micah had just got through talking about the flock and how you do the sheep in the flock and when you fillet them. So they were familiar with this. So now he's using that same talk, because it's something that we understand. The consequences. Chapter 3 and verse 9. It says, hear this, I pray you, you heads of the house of Jacob, and prince of the house of Israel, that abhor judgment and prevaileth and perverteth all iniquity. Look at this now. Micah has broken this thing down again into 3 main groups of people. Can anybody tell me what those 3 groups are? Those that have rule over you, the rulers, the priests, and the prophets. Each of these 3 groups distinctively have judgment or rule over God's people. The rulers are the ones that you would put in government. The priests, of course, are the ones that you would find administering the law. And, of course, the prophets themselves, those that stand in the gap between the people and between God. But each one of these 3 groups of people were not lined up with where God said they should be. And now Micah is trying to get this thing straight. Consequences always matter. Verse He says, the heads, therefore, judge for reward. Look at it. And the prince thereof teach for hire. And the prophets thereof divine for money. And yet they lean upon the Lord and say, is not the Lord among us? None evil can come upon us. Yeah. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man reapeth, that he also soweth. They said, the judges judge for rewards. The very judge that take these bribes are violating the very laws that they swore to uphold. They will only give you a favorable decision if you give them a favorable pocket tool. This is wrong in God's sight. Isaiah 1 and 23 says it's wrong. Ezekiel 22 and 12 says it's wrong. Exodus 23 and 8 says it's wrong. Deuteronomy 16 and 19 says it's wrong. The priests who are bound to teach the Bible and the laws of Leviticus, those very priests will not do anything unless you give them money, unless they get a position from it, unless they get something in their pocket. Quid pro quo. But you got to be careful. Go ahead and get your riches here. But I'm telling you, God will not let you forget it on that day. Just read Leviticus 10 and 11. Read Deuteronomy 17 and 11. Read Deuteronomy 33 and 10. It all points to the fact that if you are crooked and not doing what you're supposed to do, God is going to get you. They divine for money. The acquisition in verse 5 is still saying the same thing. False prophets. They sell themselves for a few trinkets of gold and silver. A few trinkets. What profits a man if he gaineth the whole world and lose his soul? Then, of course, we jump to Micah, the 6th chapter and the 7th verse. It says, will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, or with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for the transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? Now, there's a lot going on in this verse, and Micah is very careful to point it out to the people and to the prince and to these judges, because this God will not tolerate. He talks about the administration of oil, a daily amount, and what they were willing to do. You got to remember, these folks were selling and burning their children just so they could please the pagan gods around them. But God didn't put them there to appease the people around them. He put them there to be a beacon of light for the folks around them. God didn't want them to go out. He wanted the folks to come in. And this is what we have to be careful about. We have to let our light so shine so men will see our good works. And they will want to come in to the light of God. We don't go out, but we want to draw them in. I got to ask you today, have you did anything to help someone today? What have you done? If you pass today, who will say you tried to offer them a hand? you an alternative. But the heathens, their ideal retains it hold among them. They think that the fruit of their body, the rest, their children, were tossed in fire, and then they did sex dances to appease pagan gods. What kind of a person would throw their children in a fire? Right there, read Deuteronomy. And they would do these things just to be appeasing to their neighbor. Do you realize we have the best God there ever could be, there ever was, and there ever shall be? And we want to give up our God to go whoring after other gods. You remember what God said? For I am a jealous God. You got to be careful with that. Micah, the 8th verse, he says, He has shown thee, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of thee? But to do justly, and to love mercifully, and to walk humbly with thou God. Friends, I gotta ask you, God has already given us his instruction. He gave us his Bible. He gave us his word. We cannot say that we don't know how we're supposed to act. We cannot say we don't know how we're supposed to live. We cannot say that we don't know that homosexuality is wrong. We cannot say that we don't know. Yes, all of us have sinned. I have sinned. We all have. But there comes a time when we have to get to a stopping point. Because if we don't, then God will not forgive us. Who wants to have hell in this world and then get to the end of life's journey only to find out that you're going to have hell on the other side of life? One should be enough. Literally,